All right, good morning. Thank you very much for having me here today. Hopefully I can live up to that. Anyone who ever gets that kind of description before they go on stage, is that me? I don't recognise that. Hopefully I can live up to that in some way, shape or form. So yes, today I've been asked to speak about high performance in a multi-generational and hybrid context. That's quite a mouthful and I've got all of 40 minutes to do it. So what are we really talking about is the world we're in is a complex one. And how do we navigate that in such a way that we can deliver high performance and great outcomes for our organisations, but also for the people that we lead. And very quickly, because 40 minutes is going to fly by, take you through what is the perceived problem in the workplace. So what are the problems that I hear all the time? What are the stereotypes? And then what's the actual reality of what's going on? And then we're going to be talking about how we adapt what we do and how we lead to deal with those challenges that we see. There might be some time for some questions at the end, possibly not, in which case I'll be around for the rest of today if anyone wants to discuss anything or point out where I'm wrong, which may well also be true. Very briefly, why me? So I've spent all of my career in leadership in some form or other. So I spent the first part of my career in the military. As someone in their early 20s, I was given 30 to 50 people to lead in some of the most difficult places in the world. In hindsight, why on earth did they let me do that? I don't know, but I learned a lot from that experience. I then went into the city, shortly thereafter set up my own search and people advisory business, and my role was to go out and speak to clients and work out what does great leadership look like? How do you create a great culture? How do you help your teams to both perform at an exceptional level but enjoy it while they're doing it? And to be honest, I've made every mistake in the book. I've also seen the good, the bad and the ugly, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. So hopefully within that, I can give you some advice. But I think most importantly, in the last 5 years, certainly post-COVID, every room that I walked into, regardless of the topic I wanted to discuss, it kept coming back to, why aren't our people doing what they used to do? Why are the younger members of our team reacting like this? Why are they communicating like that? Why do they all seem so nervous? And a myriad of other problems. So I kept being dragged back to the same topic. So for the last 5 years, I've been studying, well, what are the generational differences? And particularly Gen Z, because that's often where the issues first stem in people's perception. So we're going to start running through that. So I'm going to slightly disagree with Declan. In reality, as far as actually managing people, there are 4 generations that you're effectively dealing with. So Gen Z, 1997 to 2012, so basically anyone up to the age of about 28 within your team will fit into the Gen Z cohort. Then we have our millennials and our Gen Xers, who broadly are your junior managers, your senior manager team. And then we have our boomers, a lot of whom have or are starting to retire now, but actually at your senior leadership level, your board level, ownership level, boomers and their perspectives and experiences still very much exist. One caveat I want to make straight away is that I'm talking at a strategic level. And at a strategic level, you can make generalizations. If you've got 100 people in the room, human behavior is remarkably predictable. And across generations, you can see trends of behaviors. But that should never take away from the fact, and I never advocate for this, we are all individuals, and no individual can you stamp a stereotype onto. So we have to both use those stereotypes to create those strategic sort of views and policies and processes, but never forget the individual, and that we're all unique, and every generation brings their own talents and experiences to the workplace. So, what is the problem? This is not my view. I'll say that very clearly. This is not my view. This is what gets reflected back to me on a weekly, if not daily basis, in the general kind of gripes and frustrations that people see in the workplace. So it starts with work behaviours just not being what you expect. And this is the manager who's just going, why can't people just turn up on time? What's going on with that handshake? Why won't they look me in the eye when they're talking to me? Why won't they pick the phone up? Just the general low-level stuff, which seems a bit trivial, but does drive a lot of irritation in the workplace. Then we get in some of the other stuff around people being overly sensitive to feedback. I'm not putting any generational stamp on that, but I'm increasingly being asked to run feedback training because people find that for some reason harder or perceive it to be harder. Lack of engagement. You're all people experts. You've probably seen the Gallup data. Engagement in the UK, in the developed world, in the workforce is pretty poor, and it continues to be so. Why is that? People will say to me that their Gen Z employees particularly are overly challenging or too quiet, just not reacting in the right way as they perceive it to be. So overly challenging might be, as an example, I've had a managing partner say to me, in quite a state of fury at the time, why does that 6-week experienced grad feel he can walk up to me and tell me why I'm running my business wrong? How dare he? Apparently that's okay. Then we get to the classic word of entitlement. That's probably the most common word I get fed back to me, is why do these younger people feel this, why are they so entitled? Why do they feel they have the right to comment on this and say what they want? I will challenge that quite strongly, but it is a very strong view that is held by certain members of our leadership cohorts. Things like more sick days, anxiety, I'm definitely not putting any agreement behind that, but there is a perception that certain members, certain generations, certain younger generations are more likely to take time off, more likely to talk about anxiety and respond to it in a way of not wanting to come into work. We can debate the accuracy of that for quite a long time. Increasing vulnerability to negative outcomes and general confidence levels. Again, can we prove that? I don't know. Maybe we just talk more about how we're feeling. But again, a lot of leaders feel that their teams are maybe less resilient, more likely to not be able to cope with the pressure that they're under and things going wrong. And again, that's often pointed at the younger generation. We have the massive office debate. I was having this chat with Declan before we started. It's still a huge debate. Are we in the office? Are we not? What are the pros and cons? If we are hybrid, what days are we in? What are we not? That's causing a huge amount of friction still. We haven't got a consensus on this. And it's very rare for me to go into an organisation and anyone go, yeah, we've got this nailed. Everyone's happy with it. We know what we're doing. It's still a difficult challenge. Difficulties communicating with clients. Again, this is one that's specifically pointed at Gen Z. I know some law firms, for example, who have issues with some of their younger members of staff don't actually go and speak to any of their clients. And they have to be specifically told, you have to communicate on the phone or face-to-face this many times in a month. Otherwise, you're not doing your job properly. Why on earth would you need to tell anyone to actually communicate? But you do. And then the perception stuff. Really, this is perception of people not willing to go the extra mile, not being ambitious. That's not true. Most humans have still got that, but the behaviours are making it look otherwise. And then the view up the chain is that because the world is changing so fast, we have a lot of people in senior leadership who are resistant to change and resistant to new ideas. So how much of that, if any of it, is actually true? Well, all of that drove me to start looking at, well, what's really going on? There's a lot of moaning happening. What's really happening? So I went back to education and I started talking to people within senior leadership and education. This quote, which you can read, I won't read it out to you, comes from a very senior head who loves his job. He cares passionately for the young people under his leadership and care, and that's his view. So clearly, something's changed, something's going on. So what is it? What's happening? What's going on? I could spend weeks talking about this stuff, so I'm going to try and skip through it relatively quickly so I don't take up your whole day. So the first point, and I think it's the umbrella that covers everything, the world we currently live in is moving at a ridiculous pace of change. So if you look at the political context, we've been in political turmoil now for years, and we're relatively stable in comparison to some areas of the world. Economics have been in a very difficult and challenging place, probably since the great financial crisis in 07 and 08. If we look at what's happening with technology, social media, use of AI, all of those things have happened so quickly and are changing so fast. And the social implications of all of those things means all of the structures around us are just moving at a pace of change that is difficult for us as human beings to cope with. So if your leadership teams, that intellectual shift, that change in operational processes they need to do now, but also plan for, is a genuinely difficult challenge. Now, some of what I say might sound like I'm criticising leadership teams. I'm not. It is genuinely hard to adapt at the rate of change we're going through. But also, we all have to remember, as people-focused people, that puts an emotional challenge on all of us. So from your senior leaders who might at times react in a way that's not necessarily emotionally helpful, it's because they're under pressure a lot of the time. And a lot of the younger generations are just reacting to the change in context that they're dealing with. So I'm going to run through some of that context. COVID. Sorry to talk about COVID. I know we hate that. We'd all wish that word would just disappear from our vocabulary. But it has still a massive social knock-on effect. Specifically, I'm going to talk about Gen Z, because I've only got time to talk about one point. So most senior leaders I work with do not recognise the massive impact that has had on Gen Z's development. So the eldest member of Gen Z was 23 when COVID hit. So everyone in your organisation who is Gen Z would have been somewhere between 17 and 23 when that period of time happened. Now, if you're currently a leader in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or whatever you might be, that period of time was annoying, actually might have been quite nice because you might have been in your nice house at home with the kids, with a nice garden, wherever it might have been, irritating but not a disaster. Unless, of course, you suffered personally through your family, but actually your life probably didn't change very much. Now, for someone between the age of 17 and 23, you had the most critical formative periods of your adult life removed. Your first serious relationship, a little bit difficult to do when you're in lockdown. Your first serious breakup, your first time moving away from home. Those core exams that you have to study for and feel that sense of success or challenge or failure that you get. That first time you move away from home and you have to learn how to adapt to different people from different socioeconomic contexts, from different nationalities. All of those challenges were replaced by stay at home, stay safe, don't challenge yourself. I'm not making a political point. I'm just making a practical point that whether you agreed with that or not, they didn't get that lived experience, but they still had to grow up on the same timeline. So they're just given a result, go off to university, stay locked in a room, then go and apply for a job and start your job. And then I start hearing leaders complaining, well, they can't communicate very well. Well, duh. Why would they be able to communicate very well? Because they haven't had that life experience. Why would they have the same confidence level when someone's been telling them for 2 years, stay safe, don't go out, don't push yourself past your boundaries? That hasn't gone away. That is still a development curve that we're having to try and work through. We need to take that into account in our training and leadership of people. So the financial crisis, even further back, why on earth am I talking about that? So people often talk about that feeling of, are people ambitious? Are they motivated? Are they driven? Gen Z have never seen a boom period, ever. Don't know what it is. It's a myth. They have only ever seen recession and stagnation. How will that make you feel when you're thinking about, ooh, I could work really hard to get to be a partner? Well, okay, but that means actually grafting for years without seeing the upside. Those of us who've been old enough to actually remember a boom period in this city, very exciting. Huge amounts of growth, lots going on, lots of fun. They've never seen that. And actually, your leaders are struggling from this now, because a lot of your leaders have been going through a bit of a grinding period with higher inflation, bonuses not being what they were, salaries not going up as quick as they were. Everyone's been working harder for less return. So it's not simply people are lazy or unambitious, it's actually harder to get a return out of the work that you're putting in. And it's important that we remember that. And then for the younger generations, it knocks on to, when am I going to buy a house? Not anytime soon if you're working in London. Therefore, do I get married when I thought I might want to get married? Do I want to have children when I thought I might want to have children? Can I actually follow the path of my parents and the generations that came before me? That doesn't seem practical. You know, I've seen young women having a chat about when they were going to have children. They just started laughing. I went, I'm not going to be able to afford that. It's not going to happen. Little bit of a depressing statement, but that's just one anecdote. The next one is a practical point. So the problem with some leadership teams is that they haven't been given the opportunity to see all the data in the world. So one very quick example, which is a minor example, but I think it reflects the bigger problem that we're dealing with, is I've sat in boardrooms and people have been complaining about being pushed to put new benefits packages in place, being pushed to do things like shared parental leave and things like that. And you'll get certain members of leadership teams like, oh, for God's sake, we really need to do this stuff. 75% of the leaders that you have in your organisations now, from middle leaders up, are almost certainly in dual income households. That's been a very rapid change in the last couple of generations. Dual income households, that means that both couples, and we'll just take, for simplicity's sake, a heterosexual couple, man and woman, pre-children, now they could both be earning the same amount of money, if not the woman earning more than the man. It is only once childcare kicks in that still goes off a cliff for women for various reasons. Now, I get senior leaders saying to me, we can't retain our great female leaders. Well, I can't imagine why, because we're not taking into account the fact that 75% are in dual income households, and yet most women are still doing all of the caring responsibilities, even though there's dual responsibility from an income point of view. So if we as businesses don't adapt to what the cultural reality is and the social reality is in the world, we can't then keep the great people that we want. We can't then build the teams that we want and have the leaders in place to develop the younger generations. So all of this stuff ties together. The big one, AI. You're going to get more from more experts than me today on this. But AI, I think from a people point of view, is the hand grenade to the future. None of us know what the future looks like. And that's a problem when you're trying to lead, motivate, and develop people for the future. So specifically for your younger people, they are very aware. So the grads coming out now, the first grads have had AI all the way through their university career. So it's completely embedded in their life. Now, they're stepping into, generally speaking, one of two organisations at the moment. Either an organisation that's going, oh, AI is a bit scary, let's not go near that, that could get us in trouble, there are some risks attached to that. That is deeply scary for someone for the younger generation. They go, well, what, you're not using this. You're not using the most powerful tool we currently have. Well, not sure I'm going to get very far with you guys. Do I really want to stay here? Or there's an organisation that is using it, they are planning for it. In the board meetings that I go into, they are talking about how do we reduce our headcount, how do we accelerate our growth, but they're not telling anyone. They're keeping it a secret, which also terrifies your teams because they're like, well, what is going to happen to us? No one's talking about this. Are we all just going to lose our jobs? The few organisations who are embracing it, who are investing in it, who are talking about it, they're much more appealing to younger people because you go, okay, at least you're acknowledging there's going to be change, you're acknowledging there's a challenge here, and I can see you're investing in it and communicating about it. Okay, well, I can get on board with that. The other point is that the old way of motivating people isn't working very well for two reasons. One is that when you say, work really hard, you'll get your promotion, you'll get to manage a director, partner, etc. You'll get all these great returns, you'll earn this money. No one's going to believe you because that's going to take 5 to 10 years at least for all of those things to happen. We don't know what the world looks like then. And this is where the entitled thing comes in because you then get behaviours and questions around, yeah, but when do I get this? Well, I want it now, I want to see that. And it's not entitlement, it's a survival instinct because you cannot guarantee that they will be able to ever get to that partner ladder because we know our structures are going to change. There are organisations doing it now who aren't telling the journalists, who aren't advertising that they're doing this, but I've sat in the meetings where they're reducing their headcount, they're changing their structures, they've already started making those changes. So if we're not actually communicating that, then we're going to have problems. Right, next one, dehumanising life and the workplace. This can get a bit deep. So what I mean by this is, since COVID, let me step back. You're all people. You know that emotion drives what we do. It drives our success, it drives our failures. Emotion is critical to what we do and how we succeed. And that emotion comes out through human connection, human communication, and the impact that we have. And on a practical level, that's how we build relationships with clients, it's how we pull teams together, it's how we influence people, it's how we succeed. We are dehumanising ourselves and removing that skill set from our teams. And we're doing that before people even join the workplace. So two social examples, dating apps and AI interviews. So both great tools. Most serious relationships now stem from a dating app. Great. But that never tells you about all the people who don't get into a serious relationship and the amount of rejection people face online, on a screen, in their bedroom with no human interaction. AI interviews. Those look like a great tool. Takes away bias. You can be more inclusive. You can reach out to far more people. But if you're a young grad coming out now and you're trying to apply to some of the top organisations in London, you will be probably having to interview at least minimum a dozen different places. If they've all got 2 rounds of AI interview up front, which a lot of them do, you could be going through 24 AI interviews, getting rejected from all of them, and you've never spoken to a human being. This is the same generation, by the way, who are locked in the room for 2 years. So how's that going to make you feel? How's that going to grow your human skills and your emotional context? Hybrid working doesn't help. Put someone back in their bedroom for a while, again, not helpful. Now, hybrid working is a problem because it is really useful for a big swathe of the workforce. If you're in your 30s, 40s, etc., and you've got kids and you've got a relationship that's very well developed, you've got a house to look after, everything else that's going on, you are, and there's lots of evidence for this, more productive working from home. But someone in their 20s who needs that support, that coaching, that mentoring, that culture, that fun around them, well, it's not so good for them. And we're not being sophisticated enough about how we're using it and then wondering why people don't have the skills that we want. Distraction and misinformation. So this wonderful thing that we all have in our pockets. There's stuff here you can't do anything about because you can't change the social context that we're in. But we are all more distracted than we ever used to be. And the one I really want to point out, and as we've got a reporter in the room, he can tell me whether he remembers any of this, but a reporter told me this, and I thought, that can't be right. That cannot be right. So I spent a lot of time investigating this. Now, what I was told was, if you go back to the 1970s, for every 4 media articles you'd see, 3 of them would be positive. I was like, get out of town. That cannot be right. 3 of them were 75% positive. And I went back and looked at it, and I was like, yeah, it's true. Now, I don't know exactly what the data is today, but once you got into the early 2000s, it was 17 negative for every 1 positive. If you want to have a break later and scroll through the BBC News or any other news channel, try and find me a positive news story in that. That damages people's psychology. They are utterly surrounded by negativity all of the time. Now, you can't change that, but what it does do, it puts more of an impetus on us as leaders to show people the positive path. Where is the good news? There's lots of good news out there. We're just not talking about it, ever. We're just talking about all the difficult stuff. So if you reinforce that at work, you're not going to have a happy, cheerful, positive workforce. We need to find that positivity and push it out to people. Working from home I've already covered. The last one. This I find really interesting because no one ever talks about it. The other stuff is probably not new to you. Everything I've said broadly you've heard of and you've had it discussed. This one, not so much. So education and parenting over the last few decades has become increasingly collegiate. Again, I'm not putting any value judgment to that. It just is what it is. And what I mean by collegiate is that it's quite rare to find any parent nowadays who subscribes to, I said no, I mean it, and there's a consequence, end of discussion. Most people are much more into, well, let's have a discussion about it, let's debate it, let's see how you feel about that. When you go to school, it's increasingly the case as well. And I've been married to a teacher for 20 years. I work a lot in the education sector, so I'm not just speaking at them. I know exactly how they're living this experience. Again, they can't just say, do that, stop, move on. They have to discuss it. They have to influence. They have to persuade. They have to debate. Now, the upside of that is, and there is an upside to that, it is very inclusive. It does allow everyone to be heard. It allows new ideas and creativity to come through, all of which is good. That is a good thing, and it's increasingly so as you go up through the educational ladder into university. But we then hit the work environment, which is not collegiate, it is hierarchical. Again, I'm not putting a value judgment on that. Frankly, I've not seen a successful working environment that isn't hierarchical. There has to be some form of hierarchy. But it's a friction point. If you've been brought up in a whole context of being in a collegiate way of working, and then you go into a hierarchy, you do one of two things. You either go inwards, and you go quiet, you're like, oh, I don't know how this works, I need to just watch this and see how I'm supposed to perform. And then we see those very quiet, shy Gen Zs, and you're like, what's wrong with them? Or someone just carries on with what they've always been told is the right thing, and they get passed on the back for, and they're the one who walks up to the managing partner and says, you're doing this wrong, I've got a great idea. Because they've always been told that's okay. So it's not entitled, it's just what they've been trained to do. And we don't have that conversation. So it's trying to understand the context within which our teams have grown up, the skills that they've learnt, and how they're going to then apply those in the workplace. I got through that quicker than I expected. Excellent. Right, so slightly tongue-in-cheek this slide, but I think most of us will probably recognise the reality that all of this stuff causes. Gen Z are just trying to find a future they can believe in. And it's hardly surprising. If you're being bombarded with negativity all the time, if you can see, I can't buy a house, how am I going to live this life that my parents lived, etc., etc., you're just trying to find something to hold on to that's positive and exciting. Millennials struggling to balance childcare, ageing parents, and affordability with increasing work demands. I've had to take out some of the stats that I normally go through because I'll be talking for hours, but childcare, certainly I think in the London region, has gone up by something like 60% in the last 10 years. I mean, it's ridiculous, the costs that we're having to balance, and salaries haven't gone up by that much. Gen X, hoping they can reach retirement with limited changes before everything falls apart. I know it sounds tongue-in-cheek, but I've genuinely had people say that to me. It's like, can I just get through this before everything changes? It's like, probably not. You're going to have to embrace it. And then boomers, blocking change they don't believe in. And that sounds harsh. It isn't meant to be, because to be fair to them, we all work on the framework through which we see the world. And if your framework's been set for 50 years, you can't adapt overnight. It's not fair. I mean, you're an exceptional leader if you can adapt overnight with 50 years worth of context. And the pace of change we're going through requires very quick adaptation, which is something I'm going to come on to. So again, we have to be understanding and supportive that if we want to take our organisations on a journey, you're going to have to take your senior leaders on that journey as well. And that will involve a bit of education and support to make the necessary adjustments. So I'm not being mean just for the sake of it. So how do we produce that? So with all those challenges going on, how do we have a Monday morning when everyone's bouncing in with all those smiles and energy on their face? Let's be honest, that's never going to happen every Monday morning. But even occasionally, it would be nice. How do we do that? So something that I've put together, is nothing brand new in this, but I've just pulled together what I think are the right behaviours and the most effective strategies for hopefully taking some of that challenging context and creating great outcomes anyway. So clear leadership in the challenging world we live in is all about being more collegiate. So we are in hierarchies, but if we can be more collegiate, we're going to get closer to what people are able to deal with. Lead with expectations, ethics and purpose, adaptation and flexibility, and then real alignment and communication. I'm going to go through those in detail in my remaining time. So, taking a collegiate approach. I was really surprised yesterday. I was doing a leadership development day for an asset management firm, and one of their senior leaders almost fed this back to me verbatim. She was doing this just instinctively with her teams. She, I hasten to add, who will be one of those senior leaders we lose because the benefits package they've got is terrible, but we'll come back to that. So, adapt leadership training to embrace leading as first among equals in an environment where people are more used to working in a collegiate manner, but also in an environment where we're dealing with so much change at the same time. Having ideas from across the group is infinitely more effective. So you can't just have one leader going, I've got the ideas, I know what I'm doing, let's go for it. Much better to be working as a team and helping each other to bring those ideas out and coming up with the best way of dealing with things. And it's easier to hold people accountable when they've been involved in the decision-making process in the first place. If they have ownership of the idea, they're going to be accountable to themselves as much as they are to their boss and the team around them. This is an idea I've stolen from a number of companies I've worked with. Their idea, they own it, but it's a brilliant idea and I think everyone should do it. Creating an adaptation team. So you know you've got big changes coming. You know you don't necessarily know how to deal with them. So get everyone talking about it. Get a small group, depending on the size of your organisation, a small group, cross-vertical, cross-generational, get them meeting monthly or quarterly. Right, how do we make this organisation better for us, our stakeholders, our owners, whoever it is? How do we make this more successful? And all of this is to help your executive team, your SLT team, to step away from some of the day-to-day challenges, because they have to be more strategic when we're going through such difficult times. So they need to be focusing on devolving day-to-day decision-making power as much as possible. Any members of SLT who are too in the weeds, too micromanaging, we need to slowly guide them away from that and focus them on just doing the strategic stuff and empowering others to make decisions, to react more quickly, and they are just there to remove roadblocks. And embed a culture of open, two-way, ongoing feedback. Again, it's breaking down that hierarchy and that collegiate approach and bringing them sort of closer together. The more we can actually have honest two-way feedback, and that does mean partners being happy to have someone junior to them telling them they were wrong and actually there's a better way of doing this. And all of us being open to that conversation and being happy and comfortable challenging each other that there might be another way of approaching the problem. So that's the collegiate approach. Then we have lead with expectations. So expectations comes from maybe that's exaggeration, a lot of conflict that I see just comes from we're just making assumptions rather than asking the question and actually understanding each other. And again, this is especially important in a hybrid environment. When people are just operating behind screens, especially when they've got the cameras turned off, which I hate, we shouldn't be doing that. But when you're doing that, people are making huge assumptions about how someone feels, what they think, what they're supposed to do, what am I supposed to do. We're not doing anyone any favours, especially for Gen Z. Because at one point I didn't mention who has had the least amount of work experience of any generation ever, Gen Z. Because there wasn't any work experience, they didn't get to do it. And when we're working in hybrid environments, how can you go and do work experience when everyone's working at home from behind their laptop? So assumptions about how people should be working are causing problems. You have to tell people, set the expectations. It's not about micromanaging, don't want to do that. It's about clarity. How do we actually give people the clarity of what we expect of them and how they should deliver? And just ask why. Don't stereotype. Whenever someone says, oh, they're just entitled, please challenge that. Please question it. Go and actually ask them, well, why did you ask that question? Why do you feel that way? What are you thinking we're thinking? How do you think we should react to that? Ask the question, don't just assume they're being greedy or entitled. Ethics and purpose. This one is hard. It's much more fluffy. I was trying to convince people of this yesterday, but it's so tangible in reality when you understand it. And it goes back to, I mean, there are a million definitions of what leadership is, but for me, the most simplest definition is you've actually got to be taking someone somewhere. If you're leading, you're going in a direction to some other place, to somewhere hopefully better. And we need to be much better at communicating that in a context where 17 of your news articles are negative to 1 positive. Let's give people the good news. We're going somewhere worth going. And why should others come along for the ride? And that's the responsibility of all leaders, not just your senior leadership team, but all the way down through your organisation. It's like, why are we here? Why are we here this quarter? Why are we here for this year? What are we trying to achieve? Where are we going? Why is that better? That can just be about money. If you want your culture to be, we're just here to make money, fine. But you need to communicate that in a positive and engaging way and hire to that. But if you actually want to make the world a better place, great. But let's communicate it. Let's identify a purpose. Let's identify a goal we're trying to work towards and hire to that and communicate it and get people excited about it. Because it will unleash a lot of that energy that is being drained away, but a lot of the negativity that people are seeing around them. And we can give that to people and give them that excitement and that positivity that they can work towards. The world does feel harder. I haven't got the time to debate the fact I'm not sure that's entirely true, but going back to the social media context and the news cycle, it certainly feels harder. It feels more chaotic. It feels more uncertain. And so it's so important that at least in work, you can give people that stability, something that gives them security and something to get positive and excited about. And high performance is always built on the foundations of purpose, values and behaviours. And it has to be role modelled and it has to be aligned. And it's not just words on a wall. It's not just an annual exercise you go through. This stuff is meaningful. And the companies who actually do that properly, the firms that do that properly, have great high-performing teams and results. It really does work. Adaptation. It's probably the most important point, I think, in the world that's moving so quickly. I will say this because it's worth saying multiple times. It's not the strongest who will survive. It is the most adaptable. The economy's doing all right at the moment, but underlying those trends, there's a lot of companies going bust. But there's a lot actually being started as well. So we're not seeing huge changes in the numbers. But I know a lot of companies in sectors being affected by AI who are going under now because they're not adapting. And that's not being unfair to them because it is hard, it's difficult, but ultimately they're not adapting. We have to adapt. You have to accept that your labour force, your team, their context has changed. The people that we've got are different to how they think and feel for all the things that I've described than they used to be. We have to adapt to that. For Gen Z especially, they are hyper aware that the future is unpredictable. So we have to give them stability. I've had people complain, and we don't talk about it so much now, about the great resignation. You know, people will move on. They will leave if they don't think you're able to give them a path forward. And again, it's not entitlement, it's just self-preservation. So we need to try and give them that. And take a data-led approach to this. So to give you an example, again, entitlement. So, all of our young team are so entitled. They're just not doing what I want them to do. So, okay, great. Well, what's the actual problem? So how much leadership input have that cohort had? Okay, well, let's go and have a look at that. Well, actually, our leaders are only in 2 days a week that overlap with those team members. So they're getting 2 working days a week and they've only just started their career. Is that enough? Okay, why are our leaders only coming in 2 days a week? Well, actually, they're juggling, because of a dual income family, they're juggling the childcare, they're juggling all of this stuff as well. They can only get in 2 days a week and the costs of getting into central London are well out of their price range 5 days a week. Okay, that's the problem. Let's solve that problem. Then we can get people back in the office more. Then we can give them the training, coaching and mentoring that they need and those entitlement problems disappear because we're actually looking after our people. So follow the data, work out where the actual problem is. Real alignment and communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. This is always what we need to do. And it goes back to my point around assumption making. We have to actually talk to each other. And in an environment where I've already described why Gen Z haven't always got all those skills, we've got to train people to communicate effectively in a way that enables them to communicate with confidence. But actually, probably the group who need this the most are your middle managers, because your middle managers are having to really deal with the challenge of senior leadership team expectations, a changing younger generation, and they've got to juggle those two things in a hybrid environment where a lot of this is behind a screen, where they're not seeing people as much, where they're not building the emotional connections as deeply as they used to. So actually how you communicate in that context is a challenge, and it will help them to get the development they need to be able to do that properly. Normalising face-to-face connection as much as possible. So I'm not here to criticise hybrid working, but if you are doing it, you have to use the office very intentionally. It's like when we are in the office, are we actually building relationships? Are we actually getting to understand each other? Are we making those emotional connections? Because if we're not doing that, then what's the point of being in the office anyway? You know, I know a number of younger people who go, well, I have to be in the office 3 or 4 days a week. It's like, okay, so what happens when you go into the office? Well, I go in and half the office is empty because the others are at home. And actually I don't talk to anybody because there's no one else on my bank of desks. I may as well be at home anyway. So you've just made someone spend money on commuting. They're now annoyed and bored. And actually we haven't added anything to it. So we have to be very deliberate about how we're using those resources that we've got. And the final point is focus on creating values-based, agile leadership fully aligned with your purpose. So that values basis to things just ties people in emotionally. Agile leadership, hopefully maybe I've made that point in a high change environment, we have to be agile. And you've got to be aligned with a purpose to give people something positive to work towards in this period of challenge that we see. So on a practical level, how do we actually move forward? So first thing for most organisations I work with is a mindset reset. So we all have to follow the patterns that we've grown up with. Your senior leadership team almost certainly have those set patterns about what works and how they think and how they react to things. Sometimes they need a little bit of a shift. So give them a bit of a contextual shift, explain what's going on, explain why the assumptions they're making aren't necessarily true, and allow them to see how the world really is. Then we have to look at an alignment reset, because once you understand some of the things I've spoken about and what's different in the world, we can then go back and look at, well, how are we structured? So how does our employee value proposition, how do our processes, how does our recruitment process, how do we retain people, how does all this connect with reality? Is it actually aligned, or are we tripping ourselves up along this process? Collegiate leadership training, I think, is critical. The more you can do this, the easier it is for all of your leaders. If everyone's contributing to how do we do this better, how do we as a team deliver this better, how do we actually make our jobs and our role more enjoyable and better, you'll have a happier organisation. Adaptation team I've already covered, communication training I've already covered as well. Those would be my first 5 steps. So, in conclusion, we have to lead the world that is, not the one that we wish it was, or the one that we used to live in. We have to lead the world that is, and that requires adapting and understanding that everyone's just human, we're all trying to do the best that we can. Let's support people to do that. Take a data-led approach, don't make assumptions, use clear if you want to, maybe, and take the first step by shifting the mindset of your key leaders. Thank you very much for listening to me. It's been very enjoyable. Is that me done?
Thank you, David. Really, really insightful. We've got 1 or 2 questions on Slido, so we'll cover those. If you want to ask your question, do it right now. Slido.com, People in Law is the event code. You've mentioned benefits a number of times as being cross generations. What does this look like? What should we offer?
That's a detailed discussion.
It is.
Whoever asked that, maybe we're going to have a coffee afterwards and we go through in more details. And I think it depends. So it's about trying to be innovative, because we haven't got infinite pots of money. But there's one, just as an example, so I've already covered we need to be more understanding of dual income families, so you need to look at parental benefits, etc. That is one I think everyone needs to look at. But something that's maybe more innovative is looking at, well, if we know we make more money and more successful if we can get people into the office for a specific reason, i.e. the training and emotional development, communication development we're going to do with those people, then actually, do we look at actually paying people to come into the office? Do we cover commuting costs, especially if you're central London-based firms? And I've had this come up probably half a dozen times in the last 6 months. There are increasingly firms thinking about that. Actually, maybe that's a way we could do this. Whether you can afford that is up to you, but I think it's a new idea that people are going to increasingly start doing.
The sense I got from what you were saying about the youngest workers is that they're not really interested in promises of jam tomorrow.
Yeah.
So does that suggest that you need perhaps smaller benefits, smaller inducements, but much more regularly?
Yeah, I think the best team. So you're right. So the whole jam tomorrow thing is no one believes there's going to be jam tomorrow, because evidence in their life to date is, well, that's not going to happen. So why should I believe it? I want it now. And good firms doing that are bringing people into offices that people want to come into. So what can we do in the office that's fun and exciting, and what benefits like paying for your commute in today can we give you? Because we can't give you that promotion tomorrow, but we can give you this today. That's a good point.
You said your background was military.
Yeah.
This is all a long way away from pointless hours of parading and don't tell him Pike and the sort of traditional view that people might have had of how leadership is done in the military.
Yes, thank you for asking that. So, yeah, that's all not true. That's not what the military is like. So people assume when you're in the military that you shout at people a lot. Some people have said, well, maybe you're not the best person to come work with our team because you're going to have a quite direct style. So that's not what it's about. If you're asking people to go and put their lives on the line, if you're asking people to support each other, that is all about emotional connection. It's all about understanding the emotion of the people around you and how you can support that, understand that, pull that together and produce outcomes where you're supporting each other and dealing with very, very difficult challenge. It's emotion and communication is the skill that you get from that, not shouting at people.
So this isn't all just woke nonsense.
No. I hate that word. And that's the thing. And I think where my advantage is because sometimes when I go and help out HR leaders who are talking about, I'm trying to convince my senior leadership team to do this, well, I can walk into the room and go, well, look at my background. Do I look like I'm talking about woke nonsense? I've had to deal with really difficult stuff, and I know this works. Actually caring for your people and doing the right thing works. It is not woke nonsense.
We'll just mop these up. For the younger generation, would you suggest mandating 5 days a week in the office? You've sort of given us your answer to that already. If they're going to come into the office, there has to be a reason for coming into the office. Just being there isn't enough.
Yeah, we have to be more sophisticated. So direct answer to the question, would I mandate it? Personally, and this is a personal choice, I'm not sure I'd just say it's right for everybody, but when someone first starts in work, I would definitely mandate a minimum of 4 days a week, probably for the first year. Maybe 2, but certainly for the first year. Whether you do it for the full 5 depends on your culture and context, I would suspect. And then ease it off from there as you feel people have grown their skills and confidence to enable them to be more hybrid.
But the flip side of that is you've got to have the senior leaders, you've got to have the senior colleagues there so that they can imbibe some of the culture and the experience.
And that's, to be honest, the biggest pushback I've had from CEOs recently is I can't get my leaders in the office. So that is actually the bigger problem.
If the root cause of office attendance issues is dual income families, childcare responsibilities and travel costs, what's the fix? It's a complex question, there's a complex answer, but is it more money?
Partially. It might be a redistribution of money. It's looking at, well, how do we distribute our benefits in a more effective way? I think most of what I'm saying is that these problems are complicated. We need to be understanding and supportive of that for our leaders. There are no simple answers. But we need to be more sophisticated and thoughtful. And benefits packages don't need to be one size fits all. It can be more targeted. We can think about, well, actually, does that person want a bonus in that context? Or would they actually prefer the kind of benefits we were just talking about? And would that be more supportive to them? Can we opt in and out of different ways of doing things? Because money is tight, but we just need to be more thoughtful about how we're applying that money than maybe we are in general.
You are here for the rest of the day, so if people have questions or they have something that requires something more than a 30-second exchange here on the stage, they can come and find you during the coffee breaks, during the lunch break as well. Great. Let's give them a round of applause as appreciation. David Hill, thank you.